Let me tell you about something that happened that I still think about years later. A 58-year-old man, active, non-smoker, no major health complaints, sat down for breakfast one morning. He ate what he had been eating for years, foods he genuinely believed were protecting his heart, foods his doctor had even encouraged an hour. Later, he collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. His family was devastated. And when the full picture came together, what he ate, what was happening inside his arteries, what had been silently building for years, it raised a question that I think every single person watching this needs to ask themselves right now. What if the food you believe is keeping your heart safe is actually doing the opposite? I'm Dr. William Lee. I'm a physician, scientist, and the author of Eat to Beat Disease. My work focuses on the body's own defense systems, the biological mechanisms that protect us, heal us, and keep us alive. And one of the most important areas I study is cardiovascular health, not just how the heart works, but what silently damages it long before any symptom appears. Today, I want to walk you through something that the mainstream health conversation has not fully caught up with yet, because the truth about certain foods labeled heart healthy is more complicated and in some cases more dangerous than most people realize. If you're new here, this channel is called Bio Secrets, and we break down real science in a way that actually makes sense for your everyday life. If you want to keep learning about how to protect your body from the inside out, I'd encourage you to subscribe now and turn on the notifications. The things we talk about here can genuinely change how you think about your health. Now, before I tell you which food I'm talking about, I want to challenge something first, because this whole story begins with a belief that millions of people carry without ever questioning it. For decades, you've been told a very specific story about heart health. The story goes like this: fat is the enemy. Saturated fat raises cholesterol. High cholesterol clogs arteries. Clogged arteries cause heart attacks. So to protect your heart, you eat less fat and more of the foods designed to replace it. Low-fat products, grain-based. Breakfasts, foods specifically marketed as heart healthy with labels and certifications to prove it. And if you believe that story, which most people do because they've heard it their entire lives, then you're probably eating certain things every single morning thinking you're doing the right thing. But here is what the science has revealed over the last 20 years that the labels on your cereal box have not told you. The original story was incomplete, and in some critical ways, it pointed people in exactly the wrong direction. The foods that replace dietary fat, the processed, grain-heavy, sugar-containing, refined carbohydrate foods didn't save hearts. In many cases, they accelerated the very damage they were supposed to prevent. And one category of food sits at the center of this misunderstanding more than any other. One food that has been stamped with heart-healthy certifications, recommended by well-meaning doctors, and eaten by millions of people every single morning, is quietly contributing to one of the most dangerous processes happening inside your cardiovascular system right now. Let me explain what that process is, because once you understand the biology, everything else will make perfect sense. Inside your arteries, there is a thin, delicate lining called the endothelium. It's only one cell thick. If you unfolded and spread out the entire endothelial lining of an average human body, it would cover the surface area of a tennis court. It is one of the most biologically active tissues in your entire body. It regulates blood flow. It controls inflammation. It produces nitric oxide, a molecule that tells your blood vessels to relax and widen. It also acts as a barrier, keeping harmful particles from penetrating the artery wall. The endothelium is, in a very real sense, the frontline defense of your cardiovascular system. When the endothelium is healthy, blood moves smoothly, vessels respond appropriately, inflammation is managed. But when the endothelium becomes damaged, when it becomes inflamed, dysfunctional, or leaky, that is when the trouble begins. Small particles of LDL cholesterol can penetrate the artery wall. The immune system responds by sending macrophages, white blood cells, to clean up the mess. But when those macrophages become overwhelmed, they turn into what scientists call foam cells, and those foam cells accumulate into plaques. The plaques harden over time, they narrow the artery, and when one of those plaques ruptures, which can happen suddenly, without warning, a blood clot forms and a heart attack occurs, sometimes within minutes, sometimes, as in the case of the man I described at the beginning of this video, within an hour of breakfast. The question you have to ask is, what damages the endothelium in the first place? Because that is where the story gets interesting, and that is where the food on your breakfast table comes in. The food I'm asking you to reconsider is refined, processed breakfast cereals and grain-based products that carry heart-healthy labeling. I'm talking specifically about highly processed toast products, puffed grain cereals, sweetened granolas, and refined wheat-based breakfast foods, particularly those that spike blood sugar rapidly. Now, I know what you might be thinking: oatmeal, whole grain cereal? These are the things my doctor told me to eat, and I understand that reaction. I've heard it many times. But let me show you exactly what happens in your body when you eat these foods and why the biology tells a very different story than the marketing does. When you eat a bowl of highly processed grain-based cereal, even one labeled heart healthy, your blood sugar rises, sometimes dramatically, sometimes within 20 to 30 minutes of eating. Now, a modest temporary rise in blood sugar after a meal is completely normal. The body is designed to handle it. But when you regularly eat foods that cause sharp, rapid, repeated spikes in blood sugar, particularly in the morning, when cortisol levels are naturally higher and insulin sensitivity can be lower, something troubling happens inside your blood vessels. High blood sugar, even temporarily high blood sugar after a meal, directly damages the endothelium. Researchers have documented this clearly. The elevated glucose triggers oxidative stress inside the artery lining. It generates something called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are essentially sugar-damaged proteins that accumulate in the vessel wall and drive chronic inflammation. High glucose also reduces the production of nitric oxide. Remember that molecule that tells your arteries to relax and stay flexible. When nitric oxide drops, arteries stiffen, blood pressure rises, the endothelium becomes vulnerable to the very infiltration that leads to plaque formation. And here is the part that surprises most people. You don't have to be diabetic for this to be happening to you. You don't have to have a blood sugar problem that shows up on your annual lab work. This process of postprandial, meaning after meal glucose-driven endothelial damage, can be occurring in people with completely normal fasting. Blood sugar. People who would never suspect they have any kind of metabolic issue. People who are eating what they genuinely believe is a heart-healthy breakfast every single morning, year after year. Now let's talk about the other ingredient hiding inside many of these heart-healthy cereals and grain products. And this one is even more deceptive because it often isn't immediately obvious on the label. I'm talking about added sugar and high fructose corn syrup. Many breakfast cereals that carry heart health certifications contain between 8 and 15 grams of added sugar per serving. Some granolas contain even more. The certification systems that approve these labels focus primarily on fiber content and sodium levels. They don't disqualify a product for containing significant amounts of sugar, so you end up with products that look responsible on paper, that carry official-looking seals of approval, but that are simultaneously flooding your body with refined sugar every morning. Why does this matter so deeply for the heart? Because fructose, the type of sugar found in high fructose corn syrup and added sugars, is processed almost entirely in the liver. When the liver is overwhelmed with fructose, it converts it to fat, specifically to triglycerides, which are then released into the bloodstream. Elevated triglycerides are a direct risk factor for cardiovascular disease. They promote inflammation in the artery wall. They contribute to the formation of small, dense LDL particles, which are far more dangerous than large LDL particles because they penetrate the endothelium more easily and are more prone to oxidation. And fructose, unlike glucose, does not trigger a meaningful insulin or satiety response, which means you can consume a significant amount of it without feeling full, setting you up to eat more throughout the day. There is also a third mechanism at work here that I want you to understand because it connects directly to what makes morning eating habits so critical. It involves something called postprandial inflammation. Every time you eat a meal, your immune system mounts a mild, temporary inflammatory response. This is normal. But when the meal is high in refined carbohydrates, high in added sugar, and low in protective compounds like polyphenols, omega-3 fatty acids, and fiber from whole food sources, that post-meal inflammatory response becomes exaggerated. Studies have shown that eating a high glycemic processed breakfast significantly increases inflammatory markers in the blood in the hours that follow, and it's during those hours that the cardiovascular system is most vulnerable. Think about what this means for someone who eats a bowl of sweetened processed cereal every morning. Every single day, they are spending 3 to 4 hours in an elevated state of post-meal inflammation and oxidative stress, with a damaged and dysfunctional endothelium, elevated triglycerides, and suppressed nitric oxide production. Day after day, year after year, and all of it happening silently, without symptoms, while they believe they are doing something good for their heart. Now I want to speak to you honestly here because I know this can feel alarming, and I don't want you to feel afraid. I want you to feel informed. The body has remarkable capacity to heal. The endothelium can recover. Inflammation can be reduced. Arterial function can improve. Science has shown this clearly. The question is, what do you replace these foods with, and how do you start moving the biology in the right direction? Let me give you real, practical, science-backed guidance, and I want to start with what I consider the most important breakfast shift you can make. The first thing I encourage people to do is replace refined grain cereals with whole, intact grains or entirely different food categories at breakfast. There is a critical difference between a bowl of puffed, processed oat clusters with added sugar and a bowl of actual rolled oats, steel-cut oats that you cook at home without sweeteners. Steel-cut oats have a dramatically lower glycemic index than processed cereals. They release glucose slowly. They are rich in a specific type of fiber called beta-glucan, which has been shown in genuine clinical research to reduce LDL cholesterol by interfering with bile acid reabsorption in the gut. Beta-glucan also feeds beneficial gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids molecules that reduce systemic inflammation and actually support endothelial health. The oat itself, eaten in its most intact form, is genuinely protective. It's the processing, the sweetening, and the marketing spin that turns something real into something harmful. The second shift is adding foods to your breakfast that actively protect and repair the endothelium. One of the most powerful groups here is berries. Blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, and blackberries are loaded with anthocyanins, plant pigments that have been shown in multiple clinical studies to improve endothelial function. Directly, they boost nitric oxide production. They reduce oxidative stress in the artery lining. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that daily blueberry consumption over 8 weeks significantly improved flow-mediated dilation, which is a direct measure of how well your endothelium is working. A handful of blueberries on your morning oats or eaten alongside eggs is not a small thing. It is a direct cardiovascular intervention. Third, and this one often surprises people, consider making eggs a regular part of your morning. Eggs have been unfairly demonized for decades because of their cholesterol content. But the science on dietary cholesterol has shifted dramatically. We now understand that for the majority of people, eating whole eggs does not meaningfully raise cardiovascular risk. In fact, eggs are one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can eat at breakfast. They are rich in choline, a nutrient essential for cellular membrane integrity and brain function. They provide high-quality protein that supports satiety, reducing the likelihood of overeating later. They contain lutein and zeaxanthin, antioxidants that protect vascular tissue. And because they have virtually no carbohydrate, they do not spike blood sugar. Replacing a bowl of sweetened cereal with 2 eggs and a side of berries is one of the most powerful cardiovascular decisions you can make at breakfast. Fourth, I want to talk about olive oil, specifically extra virgin olive oil, and why incorporating it at breakfast can be genuinely transformative for heart health. Extra virgin olive oil is rich in oleocanthal, a natural compound that acts similarly to ibuprofen in the body, reducing inflammatory enzyme activity. It's also rich in oleic acid and over 30 different polyphenols that protect the endothelium from oxidative damage. Research from the Predimed trial, one of the largest and most rigorous cardiovascular nutrition studies ever conducted, showed that a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil reduced the risk of major cardiovascular events by approximately 30% compared to a low-fat diet. You can use olive oil in savory breakfast preparations, drizzle it over vegetables, or cook your eggs in it. The key is making it a consistent part of your morning. Fifth, and I want you to hear this one carefully because it's often overlooked, is what you drink at breakfast. Many people begin their morning with commercially prepared orange juice. It sits on the breakfast table as naturally as anything else, and it carries a health halo as strong as whole grain cereal, but processed, pasteurized. Orange juice, even the kind that says no added sugar, is essentially sugar water. The fiber that would slow glucose absorption in a whole orange has been removed. A standard 8-ounce glass of orange juice contains around 22 grams of sugar and causes a blood sugar spike very similar to a soda. Starting your morning with juice alongside a bowl of cereal means your endothelium is facing a glucose and fructose surge before you've even left the breakfast table. Replace juice with water, unsweetened green tea, or black coffee. Green tea is particularly noteworthy. It contains a catechin called agape-galacatechin gallate that has been shown to improve endothelial function, reduce LDL oxidation, and lower markers of cardiovascular inflammation. The research on green tea and heart health spans decades and multiple populations. It is one of the most consistently beneficial beverages in the scientific literature. Coffee also deserves mention. Contrary to older beliefs, regular coffee consumption is associated in large-scale observational research with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. This appears to be related to coffee's rich polyphenol content, including chlorogenic acids that reduce oxidative stress. The caveat, of course, is that coffee consumed with large amounts of sugar and flavored syrups loses its benefit and gains the harms of added sugar. Black coffee or coffee with a small amount of whole milk is the version that the research supports. Now I want to step back for a moment and address something deeper because I think it's important. The reason this situation exists, the reason millions of people are eating foods labeled as heart healthy that are contributing to cardiovascular disease, is not because of any single bad actor or conspiracy. It's because nutritional Science is genuinely complicated. The food industry is skilled at interpreting guidelines in ways that serve commercial interests, and health messaging moves slowly compared to the speed at which food products reach store shelves. The certification systems that approve heart-healthy labels were designed with the best intentions, using the best science available decades ago, but science evolves, and when it does, our choices need to evolve with it. The body doesn't respond to marketing, it responds to molecules, and the molecules in a brightly packaged, sweetened, processed grain product, regardless of what the label says, tell a very different story to your arteries, your liver, and your immune system than the story being told on the front of the box. Here is something I want you to sit with for a moment. The man whose story I described at the beginning of this video had been doing what he was told. He was not reckless with his health. He was not ignoring his body. He was eating the foods that the system had told him were safe. And that, to me, is the real tragedy, not just of his individual story, but of a health conversation that has not moved fast enough to protect the people who are trusting it most. You watching this right now, you are already doing something different. You are asking deeper questions. You are willing to look at the science directly and let it inform your choices. That matters more than people realize, because the changes that protect cardiovascular health are not dramatic or complicated. They don't require expensive supplements or extreme diets. They require replacing a few things: swapping the processed cereal for whole oats or eggs, adding a handful of berries, choosing olive oil, drinking green tea instead of juice, and doing those things consistently, day after day. That consistency is what changes the biology over time. The endothelium regenerates. It responds to nutrients. When you stop flooding it with postprandial glucose spikes and inflammatory signals, and you start giving it polyphenols, healthy fats, and fiber-rich whole foods, it begins to recover. Nitric oxide production improves. Arterial flexibility returns. The inflammatory environment in the vessel wall settles down. This is not wishful thinking, it is documented biology. The body is always trying to heal itself. What we eat either supports that healing or interferes with it. I also want to mention something about stress and morning routines because it connects directly to this conversation in a way that's worth understanding. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is naturally at its highest point in the morning. This is known as the cortisol awakening response, and it serves an important biological purpose. But elevated morning cortisol also increases insulin resistance temporarily. What this means practically is that your body's ability to handle blood sugar is actually at its lowest point in the morning. A high glycemic, sugary breakfast eaten when cortisol is elevated causes a larger and more damaging glucose spike than the same food eaten later in the day. This is one of the reasons why what you eat at breakfast is arguably more important for cardiovascular health than what you eat at any other meal. The morning is when the body is most vulnerable to glucose-driven endothelial damage, and it's when the protection of nutrient-dense, low-glycemic food matters most. This is also why I encourage people to think about the timing and composition of breakfast as a serious health decision, not just a preference or a matter of convenience. What you put on the table in the first hour of your day sets the biological tone for the hours that follow. Inflammatory markers, blood sugar control, arterial function, energy levels, cognitive clarity, all of these are shaped in meaningful ways by what you eat at breakfast. If I were to summarize everything we've covered today into the clearest possible guidance, it would be this: the food your heart actually needs is real, whole, and minimally processed. It manages your blood sugar without spiking it. It delivers polyphenols that protect and repair the endothelium. It provides healthy fats that support cellular membrane integrity and reduce inflammation. It gives your gut microbiome the fiber it needs to produce the molecules that keep your arteries healthy. And it does none of the things that the processed, grain-based, sweetened products on supermarket shelves do. It doesn't flood your system with refined sugar. It doesn't trigger repeated waves of postprandial inflammation. And it doesn't carry a misleading label designed to make you feel safe when the biology is telling a different story. Eat steel-cut oats if you love oatmeal. Prepare them plainly and add real fruit. Eat eggs without guilt. Add berries to whatever you can. Use extra virgin olive oil. Drink green tea or black coffee. Avoid anything in a colorful box that needs a health certification to convince you it's good for you. Real food doesn't need a marketing campaign. One last thing before I close. I want you to think about the people in your life who eat these foods every morning. The ones who are dutifully eating their heart-healthy cereal because someone they trust told them it was the right thing to do. They deserve to know what the science actually says. Share this video with them, not to alarm them, but because knowledge like this, acted on early, genuinely saves lives. The man in the story at the beginning of this video, his family would give anything to go back and have that conversation with him. The people you love deserve to have it now, while there's still time to choose differently. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. What did you eat for breakfast this morning? Has anything you learned today surprised you? Your experience matters not just to me, but to everyone else watching who is trying to figure out the right path forward. This community is built on honest conversations about real science, and every comment you leave is part of that. And if you're not subscribed to Bio Secrets yet, I want to invite you to do that right now. We talk about the kind of science that your doctor might not have time to explain in a 15-minute appointment, the biology of how your body protects itself, what damages those defenses, and what you can do every day to live a longer, healthier life. That's what this channel is built on. And I think if today's conversation meant something to you, you'll want to be here for what's coming next. Your heart is working for you every second of every day without being asked. The least we can do is work for it in return, starting with what we put on the breakfast table tomorrow morning. Take care of yourself. The science says you can.